The crystal flute slipped from my tray in slow motion, shattering against the marble floor of the grand ballroom with a sound that silenced the string quartet mid-note. Time froze as dark red wine splashed across the pristine white hem of Seraphina Thorne's designer gown, the stains spreading like blood across snow. I stood paralyzed in my janitor's uniform, the empty silver tray still clutched in my weathered hands, the faces of corporate elites blurred around me, their expressions morphing from surprise to morbid fascination. In that suspended moment, I saw Seraphina's carefully crafted mask of refinement crack, revealing something ugly and primal beneath. "You blind old woman," she shrieked, her perfectly manicured finger pointing at my face like a weapon. "You lowly creature. Do you know what you just did?" Before I could form a response, her hand flew through the air. The sharp crack of her palm against my cheek echoed through the ballroom, louder even than the breaking glass had been. The sting spread across my skin as I staggered slightly, my hand rising instinctively to the burning imprint she'd left. Tears threatened at the corners of my eyes. Through the ringing in my ears, I heard footsteps measured, deliberate. My son James moved through the stunned crowd like a glacier, his eyes never leaving Seraphina's face. The cold fury in his expression was something I'd never seen before. "You dare hit my mother?" His voice cut through the silence, low and dangerous. But this slap wasn't the beginning of our story. It was the culmination of an invisible wall built of secrets, lies, and pretense. To understand why I stood there in a janitor's uniform, enduring such public humiliation from my son's fiancé, we must return to where it all began. The moment I chose invisibility over idleness, and the day a predator set her sights on everything my son had built. "Mom, please. You've worked enough. For 10 lifetimes. James had pleaded with me 6 months ago in my small kitchen. Sunlight streamed through the faded curtains as he pushed papers across my worn table documents for a luxury condo, a generous monthly allowance. "Let me take care of you now." I smiled, stirring the soup I was preparing. The rich aroma filled the modest space that had been our home for 20 years. "Son, I'm used to working. If I have nothing to do, I'll feel bored and useless. I just need honest work. James, don't worry about me." The furrow between his brows deepened. I recognized that look, the same determination he showed as a child trying to solve a difficult math problem. "What if I found something for you at the company? Something simple but meaningful." That was how I became Martha, the elderly janitor at James' corporate headquarters. I insisted on the name change and secrecy about our relationship. "Your employees should respect you for who you are, not because your mother mops the floors." I told him, "This is for me, not you. I need to earn my place, even at the bottom." James reluctantly agreed, but ensured I received a special employee badge that granted me access to most areas. He quietly instructed his most trusted staff to look after Martha, though none knew why this particular janitor warranted such attention. I was content with this arrangement until Seraphina Thorne entered our lives. James met her at a charity gala, the elegant, sophisticated daughter of a banking family. She dazzled him with her beauty, intelligence, and apparent warmth. "Mom, she's amazing. You'll love her," James said, bringing her to Sunday dinner for the first time. I prepared my specialty slow-cooked beef stew with handmade dumplings. "Oh, Mom," Seraphina exclaimed, embracing me tightly. Her designer perfume overwhelmed my senses. "This smells divine," James told me. "You're the best cook in the world." And I can already tell he wasn't exaggerating. Throughout dinner, she was attentive, asking about family recipes and my childhood. She insisted on helping with dishes and called me Mom at every opportunity. When James left to take a business call, I expected her to relax slightly. Instead, something else happened entirely. I need to freshen up, she murmured, stepping away.
I
Continued cleaning the kitchen, but paused when I heard her voice from the hallway. I know, right?
know the
Dinner was just awful. That old country bumpkin clings to James like a leech.
A. Pause.
I had to pretend her cooking was edible. God, I'll need to stop somewhere. For real food, on the way home. Another pause. Don't worry. Once we're married, I'll make sure she stays in her place far away from us. I silently returned to the dishes, my hands steady despite the ache in my chest. This wasn't the first time I'd been looked down upon, and likely wouldn't be the last. When James returned, Serafina transformed instantly, all smiles and affection.
2.
Weeks later, I was cleaning the executive washroom when I overheard Serafina in her office with her assistant. Make sure that janitor, what's her name? Martha, stays away from my office during my visits, she said, voice sharp with disdain. Last time, I caught her staring at my handbag like she wanted to steal it. She spritzed perfume liberally around the
room.
And have this place properly cleaned. It always smells like her old clothes when I come in. I continued my work, invisible to her, even as I stood mere feet away. That evening, I tried to speak with James at our weekly dinner. Son, I said carefully, marry someone who knows how to respect, not just someone who knows how to be respected. James smiled indulgently. Mom, I know you're protective, but Serafina adores you. She's just different from us, raised with more refinement. Give her time, I nodded and said no more. His happiness meant everything to me. If enduring Serafina's contempt was the price for his joy, I would pay it willingly. When the company announced its year-end gala, the biggest corporate event of the year, I never imagined it would become the stage for truths I'd kept silent for too long. The staff break room was my sanctuary, a small fluorescent-lit haven, where I could rest my aching knees and enjoy the simple lunch I packed each morning. Today I'd brought leftover chicken soup, the steam rising from my thermos, filling the air with the comforting scent of home. Most of the maintenance staff had already eaten, leaving me alone with my thoughts and a dog-eared paperback novel. I heard her, before I saw her, the distinctive click of designer heels against the linoleum
floor.
My spine stiffened instinctively. Through the small window in the door, I caught a glimpse of Serafina's sleek blonde hair and the flash of her diamond engagement ring as she spoke with her assistant outside. I considered gathering my things and leaving, but something in me refused to be chased away from my rightful space. The door swung open with unnecessary force. Serafina stood in the doorway, her nose wrinkling as though she'd encountered something rotting.
Ugh.
The smell of cheap food in here is appalling. Her voice was deliberately loud, meant to carry to every corner.
Can't poor people
eat anything other than this filth? This place needs to be disinfected immediately. Her assistant hovered behind her, looking uncomfortable, but remaining silent. Several administrative staff passing by slowed their pace, pretending not to listen while absorbing every word. I felt heat rise to my cheeks, but kept my eyes on my soup, taking another spoonful with deliberate calm. The chicken was tender, the broth rich with herbs I'd grown on my small balcony. James had always loved this recipe, especially when he was sick or tired. Serafina lingered, clearly disappointed by my lack of reaction. Make a note, she told her assistant.
We
need to discuss upgrading the facilities for the executive team. I can't have James exposed to these conditions. Her eyes flicked over me, dismissing me as part of the furniture. I finished my meal in measured bites, wiped my mouth with my handkerchief, and carefully packed away my thermos. Only when everything was neatly stored in my bag did I stand, nodded politely to Serafina as though she'd offered a pleasant greeting, and walked past her, with my head held high. Later that week, I was assigned to clean the executive floor after hours. Most employees had gone home, leaving the offices in the hushed, dimly lit state I preferred. I could work at my own pace, taking care. With the antique furniture and art pieces that decorated James's domain. I was in the private bathroom adjoining James's office, scrubbing the marble sink, when I heard the main door open. Instinctively, I stilled my movements, not wanting to disturb whoever had returned to work late. No, he's gone for the day, Seraphina's voice. But different, sharper, colder than I'd ever heard it. Trust me, he's having drinks with the board. We have plenty of time. I quietly set down my cleaning cloth and moved closer to the bathroom door, which was slightly ajar. Something in her tone sent a chill through me. A predatory note that awakened my maternal instincts. The paperwork is almost ready, she continued. Once we're married, the transfer of shares will be
simple.
He's already agreed to add me to all the accounts. A soft, cruel laugh followed. No, Alex, you don't understand how easy this is. James is such a lovesick fool. He trusts me completely. My hand trembled as I reached into my uniform pocket and withdrew my old smartphone, a gift from James that I rarely used. With shaking fingers, I opened the recording app and pressed the button, holding the device close to the gap in the door. 20 million. At least, Seraphina was saying, her voice now animated with excitement. Maybe more once we liquidate some assets. The stock options alone are worth a fortune. A pause. Of course, I'm sure I've seen the documents myself.
He
keeps everything in his home office. I heard the sound of her heels as she paced across the hardwood floor.
2 weeks.
After the wedding, that's all we need. The honeymoon gives us the perfect cover for transferring everything. By the time we're supposed to return, we'll be in the Malda. Another laugh. No, not the Malda somewhere without extradition.
My
heart pounded so loudly, I feared she might hear it. But Seraphina was too engrossed in her planning. The best part is I'll never have to see that old hag's face or smell that janitor stink of his. Mother again. You should see how he dotes on her. It's pathetic. She's nothing but a burden. Yet he treats her like she's precious. Tears stung my eyes, but not from her insults.
My pain
came from a deeper place. The knowledge that my son, my brilliant, kind-hearted boy, was being deceived so cruelly. I'd faced contempt before, weathered storms of disrespect throughout my life of service. But watching someone plot to hurt my child awakened something fierce within me. I've got to go, Seraphina said suddenly. I'll call you tomorrow with the account details. Don't worry, in a month we'll be set for life, and James Winston will be nothing but a footnote in my past. I heard her gather her things and leave the office. Only when the sound of her footsteps faded completely did I stop the recording and sink to the floor, my back against the cold tile wall. The evidence of her betrayal now sat in my palm, heavy with implications. That night, I barely slept. I replayed the recording multiple times, hoping somehow I'd misunderstood that there was an innocent explanation. By dawn, I knew what I had to do. James and I had our weekly breakfast at a small diner near my apartment, a tradition we'd maintained, even as his life grew more complex and demanding. He arrived looking tired but happy, kissing my cheek before sliding into the booth opposite me. Big week ahead, he said, accepting the mug of coffee the waitress poured. Seraphina's finalizing the wedding details, and we've got the year-end gala coming up. She wants you to sit at our table, Mom. I wrapped my weathered hands around my own mug, gathering courage. Son, I began carefully.
I need to talk to you about
something important. His smile faded slightly at my serious tone. What is it? You trust too much. Seraphina is not who you think she is. The words felt inadequate, clumsy. There is a conspiracy. You need to be careful.
His
expression shifted from concern to disappointment. Mom, what are you talking about? Conspiracy? I've heard things, I said, unable to bring myself to reveal that I worked in his building, that his fiancé regularly belittled me and others.
She's
not who she pretends to be when you're around. James set down his coffee with a sigh. Mom, I know you worry about me, but Serafina would never do that. She loves us both. He reached across the table to squeeze my hand. You're just stressed. Maybe this is too much change. Too quickly. I promise I'll always protect you no matter what.
the
Recording burned in my pocket like a hot coal, but something held me back from playing it. Not here. Not now.
he
Wouldn't believe it. Might even accuse me of manufacturing evidence out of jealousy or fear. I needed more than
sound.
I needed him to see with his own eyes who Serafina truly was. I hope. You're right, I said, finally forcing a smile. Just be careful, please.
As we
Parted outside the diner, I made my decision. Words were not enough against the blinding power of love. I would keep the recording safe and wait for the moment when James could see Serafina's true nature for himself. Only then would the truth have any chance of breaking through the wall his heart had built. The grand ballroom of the Western Hotel had been transformed into a wonderland of crystal and silver for James's company year-end gala. Chandeliers cast a warm glow over elegant table settings while a string quartet played softly in one corner. I adjusted my janitor's uniform freshly pressed for the occasion and picked up a tray of champagne flutes from the service station. I wasn't supposed to be serving drinks. My assigned duty was simply to ensure the restrooms remained pristine throughout the evening. But when several servers called in sick, the catering manager had asked for volunteers, I stepped forward, ignoring the ache in my knees that had worsened with the winter chill. From across the room, I spotted Serafina, holding court near the main stage. Her white gown, a custom designer piece she'd mentioned, cost more than most employees' annual salaries, glittered with thousands of tiny crystals that caught the light with every movement. Her diamond necklace, an early wedding gift from James, rested against her collarbone like a collar of ice.
Several
executives and their spouses clustered around her, laughing at something she'd said. I moved carefully through the crowded room, balancing my tray of drinks at shoulder height. Years of hard work had taught me to navigate tight spaces with precision, and I took pride in my steady hands, even at my age.
a
Waiter passed by, offering me an encouraging smile. Most of the service staff had come to know Martha as a kind, if private, presence in the building.
my
Path took me near Serafina's circle just as she was speaking with Harold Winters, the company's largest investor. I kept my eyes lowered, focusing on my task, planning to move around their group without drawing attention. The expansion into Asian markets is just the beginning, Serafina was saying.
James
And I have plans that will triple the company's valuation within 18 months.
I
Noticed a slight frown cross Harold's face at her presumptuous inclusion of herself in business decisions. Before he could respond, chaos erupted. A young man, one of the marketing executives, who'd clearly enjoyed too much free champagne, spun around suddenly, gesturing wildly to emphasize some point. To his companion, his arm struck my shoulder with surprising force, throwing me off balance. I lurched forward, the tray tilting sharply in my hands.
time
Slowed as I watched the champagne glasses slide across the silver tray, tumble through the air, and shatter against the marble floor. Worse still, a half-full glass of red wine left on my tray by a guest who'd changed their mind, tipped forward, its contents arcing perfectly through the space between us to splash across the pristine white fabric of Serafina's gown.
The
deep crimson liquid spread quickly, staining the delicate material from neckline to waist. Gasps erupted around us as conversation died. The marketing executive began stammering apologies. But Serafina didn't seem to hear him. Her eyes, suddenly cold as Arctic ice, locked onto me. The transformation was instantaneous, the mask of refinement and charm crumbling away to reveal something ugly and raw beneath. You blind old woman, she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at my face. Do you know what you just did? The ballroom fell silent. Even the string quartet stopped playing, the last note hanging unfinished in the air. This dress costs more than you'll make in a decade. Spittle flew from her mouth as her voice rose to a screech. You low-class trash. How dare you stain this dress? What kind of rude, filthy animal are you? I stood motionless, the empty tray still clutched in my hands. Around us, guests shifted uncomfortably, some averting their eyes, others watching with uncomfortable fascination. The marketing executive tried to interject to explain. It was his fault. But Serafina was beyond reason. Do you think this is funny? She demanded, advancing on me.
Do
you know who I am? Who I'm going to be? Miss Thorne, it was an accident, I said softly. I apologized for the sharp crack of her palm against my cheek cut off my words. The force of the blow snapped my head to the side, sending a shock of pain across my face. The sound echoed through the silent ballroom like a gunshot. Security, Serafina screamed, her face contorted with rage. Get this trash out of here, immediately.
I want
her fired. I want her banned from the building. My cheek burned where she'd struck me, but I remained upright, my eyes level. I had endured worse in my life. The physical pain was nothing compared to the disappointment of seeing how completely my son had been deceived. Serafina, stop. James's voice cut through her tirade as he pushed through the stunned
crowd.
I hadn't seen him approaching, but the horror on his face told me he'd witnessed everything. He positioned himself between us, one hand gently touching my shoulder, the other extended towards Serafina in a halting gesture. What are you doing? This was clearly an accident. She ruined my dress. Serafina's voice had taken on a shrill, almost hysterical quality. Your staff is incompetent. This ugly old woman should never have been hired. James's expression hardened, something cold and unfamiliar settling over his features. The woman you just slapped, he said, his voice tight with controlled rage. The woman you just called low-life trash and an ugly old woman is my mother? A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Serafina's face went slack with shock, her eyes darting between James and me as understanding slowly dawned. But she's a janitor. Her voice faltered. Yes, James said. My mother chose to work as a janitor in my company because honest work gives her dignity. The dignity you just tried to strip away with your cruelty. Serafina quickly attempted to recover, forcing her features into an approximation of contrition. James, darling, I had no idea. Why didn't you tell me? I'm just upset about my dress. You know how emotional I can get. She reached for him, her voice softening. If I'd known she was your mother, you'd have what? Treated her with basic human decency. James stepped back from her touch. The fact that you'd treat anyone this way tells me everything I need to know about your character. My hand moved to my pocket, fingers closing around my phone. The moment I had dreaded and anticipated had arrived. It's not just an unprovoked slap. James, I said, my voice, low but strong, cutting through the tension. She is your enemy. Listen. I raised the phone and pressed play. Serafina's voice, cold, calculating, and unmistakable, filled the silent ballroom. 20 million at least, maybe more once we liquidate some assets. The stock options alone are worth a fortune. Serafina's face drained of color as her own words continued. 2 weeks after the wedding, that's all we need. The honeymoon gives us the perfect cover for transferring everything. By the time we're supposed to return, we'll be in the Malda. She lunged toward me, hands outstretched for the phone, but James caught her arm. The best part is I'll never have to see that old hag's face or smell that janitor's stink of his mother again. You should see how he dotes on her. It's pathetic. She's nothing but a burden. Yet, he treats her like she's precious. The recording continued, revealing every detail of her plan, the accounts she intended to drain, her lover waiting to receive the stolen funds, their plans to disappear to a country without extradition. When the recording ended, the silence that followed was absolute. Serafina stood frozen, her face a mask of shock and fury, caught in the trap of her own words. Alex, James said finally.
Your
Lover's name is Alex. Serafina's mouth opened and closed, no sound emerging. Her eyes darted around the room, taking in the faces of the board members, investors, and colleagues who had witnessed her exposure. Security, James called, his voice eerily calm.
please.
Escort Miss Thorne from the building. And call the company attorney. We'll need to discuss pressing charges for attempted fraud. As security approached, Serafina seemed to collapse inward, her posture crumpling as the magnitude of her failure crashed down upon her. The woman, who had seemed so powerful moments before now, looked small and desperate, her designer gown stained, not just with wine, but with the indelible mark of her own treachery. Serafina's legs seemed to give way beneath her as the recording ended. She sank to her knees on the marble floor, the wine-stained fabric of her gown spreading around her like a blood stain. Broken glass crunched beneath her as she shifted, her perfectly manicured hands trembling. No, 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 she whispered, her voice cracking, her eyes wild with desperation, fixed on James. That's not what it sounds like. You don't understand. James stood silent, his face a mask of controlled fury. The ballroom remained hushed. Hundreds of witnesses to her downfall, frozen in collective shock. Suddenly, Serafina lunged toward me, her hands outstretched for my phone. Give me that.
You've tampered with it.
You've always hated me. James stepped between us, his broad shoulders forming a protective barrier. That's enough, Serafina. I don't know what she's
doing.
Serafina's voice rose to a hysterical pitch as security personnel approached from both sides. That was my lawyer on the phone. We were discussing prenuptial details. James, please. I love you. I looked at the woman kneeling before us, her carefully constructed persona shattered beyond repair. In that moment, I felt no triumph, no vindication, only a profound sadness that she'd been willing to destroy my son for money. You only love my son's money, I said quietly. You are only afraid of losing that money. You don't regret the slap. You only fear this recording. The truth of my words seemed to hit her like a physical blow. For a brief moment, her mask slipped completely, revealing naked hatred in her eyes. James turned to address the room, his voice steady. Despite the emotion I could see rippling beneath his composed exterior.
The
engagement is cancelled. Effective immediately, he glanced down at Serafina, and I will pursue every legal measure available against Miss Thorne for fraud and conspiracy. You can't do this to me, Serafina hissed, attempting to gather some final shred of dignity as security guards approached on either side. Do you know who my family is?
what?
They'll do? I know exactly who you are now, James replied. That's enough. The security team escorted her from the ballroom, her protests fading as the heavy doors closed behind them. A moment of heavy silence followed before the room erupted in hushed conversations, the scandal already spreading through whispers and discreet text messages. Harold Winters, the investor who had witnessed everything from the beginning, approached us slowly. James, he said, extending his hand. I've always believed in your business acumen. Tonight I've seen your character as well. He turned to me with newfound respect. And yours,
ma'am.
As the initial shock subsided, James guided me to a quiet alcove away from the curious stares and murmured speculations. His hands gently cupped my face, examining the red mark that still burned on my cheek. I'm so sorry, Mom, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. I should have listened to you. I should have seen through her. Love blinds even the wisest eyes, I said, reaching up to smooth a wrinkle from his lapel, a maternal gesture I'd performed thousands of times throughout his life.
You
Weren't ready to see until tonight. He pulled me into a tight embrace.
and I.
Felt the slight tremor in his shoulders that told me he was fighting back tears. You risked everything, your job, your privacy, your dignity to protect me. How can I ever thank you when we separated? I saw a new resolve in his eyes, a maturity that hadn't been there before. He took my hand and led me back into the main ballroom where conversation quieted at our approach. James ascended the small stage at the front of the room, still holding my hand.
He tapped
The microphone to ensure it was active, then addressed the crowd of employees, investors, and business partners. Ladies and gentlemen, I owe you an explanation and an introduction. He drew me forward gently. This is Elizabeth Winston, my mother, the woman who raised me alone after my father died, who worked 3 jobs to put me through college, and who, as you've witnessed tonight, just saved this company from a predator. A wave of applause rippled through the room, surprising me with its warmth and sincerity. From this moment forward, James continued, Winston Enterprises will operate on a foundation of absolute respect for all employees, regardless of their position. The janitor who cleans our offices is no less valuable than the executive who occupies them. This is not just company policy. It is our core value, and one I should have honored more fully before tonight. In the days that followed, the story exploded across business news and social media. Serafina's scheme became a cautionary tale in corporate circles, her name synonymous with failed deception.
James.
Legal team moved swiftly, building an airtight case against her for fraud, conspiracy, and breach of fiduciary duty. Her family's influence, substantial as it was, couldn't shield her from the consequences of actions. Captured in her own words, I finally accepted James' offer of retirement, moving into a comfortable apartment close to his home. Not the luxury penthouse he'd originally proposed, but a modest place with a small garden where I could grow herbs and vegetables, something I'd always wanted, but never had time for during my working years. James visited weekly for dinner, often bringing complex business problems disguised as casual conversation. Just thinking out loud. Mom, he'd say. Though we both knew he valued my perspective more than any hype-aid consultant, the invisible wall that had separated our worlds, that had allowed me to work unrecognized in his company, had crumbled. In its place grew something stronger, a shared understanding that true value lies not in titles or appearances, but in the character that persists when all masks fall away. On my 70th birthday, James presented me with a simple plaque that now hangs in the company's main lobby. It reads, "Character is how you treat those who can do nothing for you." Beneath it, in smaller letters, in honor of Elizabeth Winston, who taught us the meaning of dignity. It's not the recognition that matters to me, though. It's the knowledge that my son finally sees the world clearly, that he learned before it was too late to recognize truth behind beautiful facades. That lesson was worth every moment of invisibility, every silent slight I endured, and even the sting of Serafina's slap upon my cheek. In the end, what divides us isn't wealth or status, but the walls we build in our hearts. Elizabeth's story reminds us that true dignity cannot be granted by others or taken away by their cruelty. It lives in how we choose to face each day, each slight, each challenge. The invisible walls between people crumble, not through confrontation, but through the quiet persistence of
Character.
Picture that moment when the wine spilled and truth poured forth, when a mother stood tall despite the sting on her cheek. Her eyes reflecting not hatred, but the steady light of unconditional love in that crystallized
Second.
everything falls shattered like glass on marble. Today, look around at the invisible workers in your world. The cleaners, the servers, the quiet ones who make your life possible. See them fully. Honor their dignity with your respect. For we are all, in our own ways, both the humble janitor and the company president defined not by our titles, but by how we treat those who can offer us nothing in return. And if this story touched you, share it with someone who needs to remember their own strength. And don't forget to comment, subscribe, and visit the Stories Beyond Words channel to discover more heartfelt tales of love, justice, and redemption. Because here, every story begins and ends
With